Whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. I'm Maria Thompson Corley. If that quote from Philippians resonated with you, stay tuned. I'd love to introduce you to intriguing, creative people whose light is making our world a lovelier place. Welcome to Finding Beauty.
Yemaya, Mother, I call to you. Mother of the seven seas, Mother of life, help your children. Mommy Water of the seven seas, of seven skirts that swirl about the planet, salt water cleaning out, salt water burning open, sores and wounds, your ocean's healing. Yemaya of the seven seas, of seven skirts that swirl around the land, Yemaya, Mother of life, healing waters. Our problem is the water. Mommy Water, the water is poisoning us. The logic of white supremacy inside the water. The logic of fracking inside the water. The logic of lead inside the water. The water is killing us, your children. Yemaya, Mother, I call to you. Mommy Water, the water is killing our souls, dividing us from self, head from heart, mind from body, feelings from sensations, divided and cutting off. Yemaya, this water numbs me. This water drugs me. This water distracts me. Truth eludes me in this water. Yemaya of the seven seas and the seven skirts swirling around the land, forgive us. Forgive me for drinking the water, for spreading the water, for not even seeing the water. Yemaya of the seven seas, of the seven skirts swirling about the land, clear us, clear me. Mommy, the water calls back to you. Mommy Water of the seven seas, of the seven skirts that swirl around the land, the arsenic in the water, the plutonium in the water, slides down our gullets like a lumberjack, clear-cutting a new path, radon, lead, arsenic, cadmium, white supremacy, heteronormativity, patriarchy seeping into our pores, gulping and gagging. We ask for more. Yeah. Of the seven seas, seven skirts swirling around the land, we need you. Take back the water. Structure the water. Heal the water. I call to you, Mother. Yemaya, 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 Yemaya.
That was Dr. Amanda Kemp. And is that one of your poems, Amanda?
Yes.
Yeah, wow. That poem sums up a lot of things. Your bio says you blend activism and spirituality, theater arts, and history. She's won a number of awards, including a John Gardner Fellowship from Stanford University, an award from PUSH, which means People United to Save Humanity, Racial Justice Awards from the YWCA of Lancaster, NAACP Lancaster Civic Award, Penn Council on the Arts, Penn Humanities Council Award, National Endowment for the Humanities, a Ford Foundation Pre-Doctoral Fellowship. There's a lot more in your bio, but I think I'm going to cover that by asking you some questions, if you don't mind. So let's go way back. Your childhood would have classified you as at risk because you were a survivor, as you mentioned, of the foster care system. And yet somehow you managed to attend Stanford, and you ended up with a PhD from Northwestern. And I was wondering, did you always believe in yourself, or was there a particular person or thing that happened in your life that inspired you to believe you could do those things?
Well, the short answer is no. I didn't always believe in myself, and I still don't always believe in myself.
Huh.
Every so often I feel incredible doubt, wondering, am I doing enough? Am I enough? Have I done enough with the opportunities that have been given to me, given where I come from? So it's an ongoing practice of affirming that I'm good enough, I've done enough, there is enough, and what I'm doing right now is the right thing for me to be doing with the time that I have.
So even with this nagging sense of not being enough, and I think, there's a whole thing about imposter syndrome, and in fact, that's something that my sister, when she was doing her psychology degree, did something with imposter syndrome, and I know that women in particular, maybe, or I don't know, maybe everybody, but she was focused on women, but to have come out of foster care, and I have no experience with that. The impression that you get is that that sort of thing would play with your mind, set you back a bit, but to get to a place like Stanford, you had to have some drive that was there from the beginning, or no? How did that happen?
Yeah, well, simultaneous. You asked me, did I get over the doubt, or was it ever any doubt? And I was just saying, no, you don't. I don't think you do get over the doubt. I think that our larger society constantly cultivates a sense of we're not enough. We need to buy this thing or do something else or rush more, So I just wanted to be honest with you and say that.
Yeah, I totally get that. It's what happens when you start putting too many things in one question. And it's not like nobody from foster care will get to an Ivy League school or do those sorts of things. But I was wondering, you just worked really hard in school and you just decided, I want to go to Stanford.
No. So first, so I grew up in New York City, and most people when I grew up in the 80s, when I said I was going to go to Stanford, after I graduated from high school, or, that spring when you would find out where you were going to college, most people in my neighborhood, I had to go, no, not Stanford, Connecticut, Stanford in California.
Yeah.
And even then, their reaction was, California, isn't that where there are mudslides, earthquakes? Why would you be trying to go there, So I grew up in a place, what I'm trying to say is I grew up in a place where, New Yorkers think of New York as the center of the world. So why would you leave?
Yeah.
So to have that aspiration or even the confidence to apply, I would say came from a number of sources. The first one I would acknowledge is that inside of me, there was always a burning desire, a light, a little calling to say, you've got to get out. And by that, I meant, I guess that could have meant many things, but one of the things it meant was the home that I was in, my first foster home. There were good things about it because I was there for 8 years, so it had continuity. I had a very consistent, stable, loving, and firm foster mother. And I was also experiencing sexual abuse that she didn't know about. And I was living in a neighborhood where I just felt constantly unsafe. So inside of me, there was this little voice saying, you got to get out. Like I wanted to get beyond and outside of the projects. I wanted to be somewhere with grass and more space. I'm just being honest with you. So there was that. And that desire and books that I read about people who were living in far different circumstances from me made me curious about the world beyond where I lived and made me identify with people who weren't like me, who didn't look like me, who weren't dealing with my circumstances, and who were like having different kinds of life challenges. So through literature, I'm saying my world kept expanding through this little voice inside of me that said, you got to get out. And the other place I will point to is Dr. Martin Luther King. When I was a little girl, I really had a fascination with him. I really identified with his message of beloved community and social action to shift reality. And just his willingness to put himself out there on behalf of other people. I just really loved that. So I felt called to something bigger than my individual self and all these things going on like that. And couple that with the social programs that people from the 60s and 70s had demanded and had fought for and had gotten put in place for kids like me growing up in poverty in urban low-income communities. There were educational programs that were free to me. And I had a foster mother who wouldn't let me out the house unless I was going to something educational. So I chose to go with the flow with that and just try to get involved in as many educational things as possible so that I could, have a social life. So, I was in a special science program. When I was in 7th grade, I started to earn my first money when I was 12 because I was working at a lab at CUNY, City of New York, in a chemistry lab. And I did that for 2 summers. Some kids were getting into a special Saturday school that ultimately led to them applying to boarding schools. I didn't know that they were going to apply to boarding school. All I knew was that they were going to school on Saturdays, and it sounded good. And I asked if I could be in the program because they didn't initially have me on the list of kids to invite. So one of my friends who was a Jehovah's Witness, her parents weren't willing to let her take advantage of the program, so I asked if I could take her place. And the people in charge said yes. And I always think it's so great when kids advocate for themselves. I think we should always say yes whenever they take it upon themselves to advocate, because when I advocated, people said yes to me. So all those kinds of things led me to have extraordinary opportunities and to simultaneously keep believing in myself and keep wondering when I was going to wake up from this magical life that I was having that was so different from what I had grown up with.
And so in the midst of all that, you must have discovered early on that you had artistic talents. I mean, you said you were a lifetime poet and performer. Was that also something that you discovered when you were in foster care?
Yeah, that's so interesting because I was always inventing drama and performing for myself if for no one else, creating songs, performing for myself, usually it's for no one else. So yeah, I was always creative, and I wrote my first poem that I can remember when I was 9, and it was to Dr. King. So it's always been a part of me. It got reinforced here and there. I never thought of it as, oh, this is what I'll do with my life, is I'll have a life in the arts. Even all the way through high school, when I did a lot of arts in high school, I always thought of myself as, I'm going to be involved with civil rights. I'm going to be an attorney. I'm going to be expanding rights for people. I'm going to get into politics or some kind of public service.
I think it seems like you figured out a way to combine the two. And,
I did. I did. I just didn't have any models when I was growing up that you could combine them.
Yeah. Okay, so the first community event that you ever attended, or the first protest or something that had to do with civil rights and was a group, can you talk about that?
Sure. So the first march I ever attended was in support of, I think, 4 Black South Africans who were scheduled to be executed by the apartheid government, which by then had declared a state of emergency, and this would have been in 1983-ish. So, yeah, I went to that march. My teacher, one of my favorite teachers, her husband took me because by the time I was in boarding school, and he was a peace activist, so he was used to going to marches. He was white, and the march turned out to be predominantly Black, and it turned out to be very angry. And at first it was all anger turned toward the apartheid government and toward the U.S. policy of constructive engagement, Reagan's policy, basically. And I was definitely okay with that. I don't remember feeling like that concerned. I was maybe a little concerned about the anger thing because, I had this little Dr. King thing going on in my heart. But, yeah, I felt like I was still in the right place. And then we went to a meeting afterwards, and I remember it being almost completely Black, except for my white teacher who we got separated. I like to sit in the front of the room when I go to things. So I was way in the front, and he was way in the back.
Uh-huh.
And then all of a sudden the conversation in the meeting, people's anger really just kind of got stoked. It just got, more and more voices were adding and more things are being said. I remember one point, I think it was a woman who got up and said, for every one of us that they kill, we should kill 10 of them.
Oh,
and that's when I started feeling like, wow, I got to leave this place, and what will happen to my teacher's husband who brought me here? All of a sudden I started feeling like I was responsible for him.
Mm-hmm.
So, nothing happened. I mean, we left the meeting.
Yeah.
When I wanted to. It wasn't like he was the one saying, okay, man, we gotta go. I was the one who was saying, okay, I'm ready to go. And, so that was a very instructive moment for me, because even then I was holding the space of justice and the space of the possibility of oneness, of holding people accountable, and of just not giving in to anger, or self-righteousness.
Yeah, and that can be a challenge.
Yes.
I mean, I suppose feeling angry is normal. Is what do you do with that anger? How do you respond to the anger? Because I think it's almost impossible never to be angry about injustices, but I guess if you're channeling it into something that's constructive. I mean, that woman may not have actually meant 100% what she said, even if it felt to her good to say it at that moment. But, and once you start getting people stoked in that direction, someone's going to take you seriously. And, I feel you. So you have organized events as well. What was the first one that you ever organized?
Wow. Well, the first political thing I ever organized was when I was in high school. I organized a campaign where the community government could overrule the headmaster, much like the Congress can overrule the president.
Uh-huh.
And we were not successful, but interestingly enough, we got a lot of students to sign, of course, as you might imagine, but maybe even more interesting, a number of faculty and staff signed it.
Wow.
Yeah. And so it wasn't successful, but what it gave me was an experience of enrolling people, of talking to people, of, making a case and having to stand up and represent. And that continued when I went to Stanford.
Now, do you consider yourself to be an extrovert? Because it seems like it would help in this sort of thing if you were outgoing, or you're just so driven by what you feel is a necessity that you step out of yourself to do these things.
At my most beautiful, and by that I mean powerful, grounded, not ego-driven, at my most beautiful, I do feel outside of myself. I feel like I'm channeling something on behalf of the community, the generations before me and generations who come after me. And I'm also an extrovert.
Well, no, that helps. I mean, because sometimes you have people like, for example, I'm a performer, but I'm an introvert. I just really like to share the music once I've learned it. I really feel almost driven to share it with somebody. And so there's a gray area. I mean, there's not a pure anything. But I was just wondering because, you do a lot of that stuff. So tell me about apprenticing with Maxine Waters and Jesse Jackson. That's awfully cool.
Yeah, that was a learning experience. It was after that I decided I really wanted to go more into the arts than into politics. So working with those two, I got a sense of how hard it is. And what I mean is there was a certain kind of purity to being a student organizer, which is what I did while I was at Stanford. I mainly worked and organized students around making things more just and equitable and inclusive on campus. And when I graduated and worked with those two, that was more doing work to help the Rainbow Coalition stabilize in California, to assist the executive director, who was someone that Maxine appointed to that position, who was a great mentor to me, Asian American man. That's when I saw that politics, everyone wasn't equals, and that people had personal interests or professional interests driving them in addition to whatever the issue was, I guess I saw the limitations of electoral politics because when I would say something, then people would say, well, that's not realistic.
Mm-hmm.
Or that's not in the realm of the possible. And electoral politics is always in the realm of the numbers of what's possible now, not within the realm of what should we be organizing people to fight for.
But possible evolves. Very famously, all these people thought it was impossible to elect a black president. But I understand, you start off with this pure vision of whatever you think you want to happen, and then it seems never like it's going to happen, and then you start scaling back your goals and your dreams.
Yeah. And also, I felt like there was not enough heart and juiciness in it. It was like very, strategic, and it sort of had a hardness to it. And it felt like art was the realm of the possible. And it was the realm of uniting people and of visioning, and it just felt very life affirming, and for me, and to be shared with people felt life affirming because I had been writing on the side. I was the person that people would say, come to our rally and perform a poem, Amanda, and I did. I loved doing that. And I've been writing plays always on the side. And that year that I apprenticed with them, I actually applied, I think that year or the year after, for an MFA in playwriting program. And then eventually that's when I went to Northwestern to do ultimately a PhD in performance studies.
And then it was after that you ended up in South Africa working for the Ford Foundation?
Yeah.
And what were you doing there?
I went there because I was exhausted by grad school after my first year, and a whole bunch of personal stuff that I hadn't been dealing with, meaning healing stuff I hadn't been tending to.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to get off of the grind of grad school, and here was an internship they had for 2 months in South Africa, which was in the middle of negotiations. So at that point, that part of the internship hadn't even been publicized yet, but because of my background, they were like, well, instead of Kenya, what do you think about South Africa? And I was like, oh yeah, I've been learning about South Africa for a long time. Mm-hmm. So I worked there for a summer, and I didn't want to go back to grad school. I was in love at the point with a jazz musician, and I was rediscovering my poetic voice. And so, and the Ford Foundation was like, well, you could work with us half-time on this project we have going on that you started over the summer. And so it was like amazing confluence of yeses happening at the same time. So I decided to stay there for a year and do that work on the report on National Women's Movement.
That must have been an amazing experience of delving into that and just learning, how their culture and their struggles. And, I hadn't read your reports. I don't know what you found out, but just, seeing that was what you were doing over in South Africa, I was just thinking, wow, what an amazing opportunity.
It was. It was also a time of a lot of intense personal struggle. I had been going a long time and not acknowledging what my previous sexual abuse, how it was affecting me and my relationships with men. And that started to catch up with me in South Africa. So yes, it was a tumultuous time, politically, exciting, artistically, and yes, it was a place where I was starting to come to face.
I guess the thing is that these moments of birth and rebirth, there's no convenient time and place to address these things, they just follow you around until you look them in the face. Then you founded Theater for Transformation. You've taught some very highfalutin places like Cornell, but you also are very passionate, it seems, about working with young people. Can you tell me about founding Theater for Transformation?
Yes. I founded Theater for Transformation right at the end of my college teaching career. I had been teaching for about 10 years in the academy at different universities and colleges, and I took a sabbatical to be a scholar in residence at a spiritual retreat center. And I used that time to really go within to say, okay, who am I really? What is it that I'm really here to do? And that's when I excavated my mission to heal the planet. Like when I really got back to that very young girl before various disappointments and constraints had been put on it by me and others, what was really there inside me. And it was to heal the planet. And what I had always loved, even when it was hard, was theater. So even when theater was going bad, I still loved it. And when theater was going great, I loved it. And there was nothing else that I felt that way about. And I mean theater really as a writer. As a writer, I didn't feel a need to be on stage. Mm-hmm. I still don't, but I can be. Mm-hmm. So I founded Theater for Transformation really in late fall 2007 when I decided that was my mission, that I was on a mission to heal the planet, and that I was going to tell people about it. I was not going to hide my light and hide how big my vision was so that I could be acceptable to other people. I was just going to be this weird person with this very broad mission. So I founded the company coming out of that commitment to live into that mission while I was at that retreat center, and then we started to tour a show that I had written previously. It left Pennsylvania. I think, my first gig was in California, and then another one was in Missouri, and then another was, we just traveled a lot, and this was a piece about Show Me the Franklins.
Now, who were you say we? I mean, like, you had this vision, and then you went and said, hey, I want to use a space. I mean, you invited people to your house. You sent out flyers to attract, like, who were we?
Yeah, who's the we? So the we were, I really felt it was coming from me and my ancestors. At that retreat center, I really had a lot of space and support to listen deeply and to non-material, non-physical beings, including trees and the ground, and just really listening. So I had an idea and I had a piece, and while I was at the retreat center, other people who were there in the same program, I invited them to come over and read my play aloud to me because it had all been in my head. And I believe, I think it was all white women who were the readers of my play, which had no white women in it. Oh no, maybe there's one white female character. But they were friends and they were willing to read, and they read it aloud, and then they just confirmed to me, like, this is important, and this is really good, and this is really deep, and wow, you've got to keep going. So I did, because I had a friend who was working at Stanford, and I don't know what, somehow, for some reason, I reached out to her about this project, and she was like, well, if you can come in December, we'd love to have you. And then all of a sudden I had a gig. Yeah. And then I had to recruit Black actors, because that's who the piece was about, really. What I'm saying, Maria, is that I spent a lot of time crying in my room at the retreat center because I was afraid to take each next step. I would eventually stop crying and then do the next thing.
Well, I mean, you know what? Someone was saying that tears are a release of tension, whether it's, happy tension or whatever. Crying is not a bad thing. It's not necessarily a counterproductive thing or procrastinating. I mean, it can be. It can just be, okay, you needed to get that out so you could move forward, clear some space or something. I don't know. Well, that's an exciting story, too, because, for people who are unsure, just being able to realize that lack of certainty is just not a reason to let go of something if it feels like it's that important. You have these things that keep recurring and keep coming to you, and then you're afraid, and then that's okay, you're afraid, and then what do? Well, if it keeps coming back, then it's something that you just work through or push through the fear. If it means tears, well, that's what you need to do. But you're not directing Theater for Transformation anymore. You turned it over to somebody else and moved on to something else, or how did that decision come about?
So I founded it, and then I ran it, developed it into this company that had a very large board and, was getting some larger grants, and I burnt out. It was a classic story of the chief artistic vision holder and implementer, also being the chief fundraiser, also being the person who was organizing and trying to keep the board involved. Every great idea doesn't need to become a nonprofit. But unfortunately, in our U.S. society, the way that things have been set up, if you don't become a nonprofit, then you can't get significant institutional support or even significant support from individuals who have money to give. Because the way the whole law is set up, they can only give it to 501c3s.
Okay.
So I was a classic example of using a structure that was really not quite appropriate to the art form, to what I wanted to do, and then didn't have the infrastructure to maintain it. So it just got bigger than could be sustained. And eventually I stepped away from the organization, and then the board got back in touch with me and said, you know, we can't sustain it, and we don't want to close it without giving you an opportunity to come back and take it on again, because it's so difficult to establish a 501c3 that to close it down, it's just like, they didn't want to do it without giving me an opportunity to take it back. So I did come back on board as the director of it and a board member of it, but very clear that, okay, I'm not going to grow this. My intention is not to grow this organization. My intention is to grow art and to keep this as minimal as possible so that the art is primary, and that's the primary thing I'm growing. So that means walking a fine line between how big a project can be and then how much infrastructure does it take and how many people you want to have on a board, because the more people you have, the more work you have to do to maintain it. So all those kinds of considerations. So I am currently the artistic director of Theater for Transformation, and I am doing it differently the second time around.
And those are the sorts of things that I would think that you can only learn from the experience. I've never tried to do anything like that. So that idea of creating something that would be, you know, such a big framework is really kind of scary to me. So I applaud you for going there. But now you are developing other artistic projects, like Inspira is how you pronounce it, correct? Inspira?
Yes.
Can you talk about that? It's a very interesting combination of elements.
Yes. So in the first rendition of Theater for Transformation, we did plays, all written by me. Almost all of them included me as an actor on stage, and some of them had me as a director. So that was the early version of Theater for Transformation, and some good work was done then. Absolutely, I'm proud of it. And this go around, prior to taking Theater for Transformation back on, I formed an ensemble called Inspira, which is also the name of a spoken word and music piece. So instead of writing a play and having music in it, I focus on writing poetry and using journal excerpts and collaborating with musicians to put that to music. Not necessarily sung, but to be spoken to music and dialogue with music. So Inspira, the power of the spiritual, it's a piece that used spirituals as the primary music, and then spoken word, mostly about what was happening with Ferguson and the killing of Eric Garner and the police officer not being held accountable and Sandra Bland being killed. It was so all pieces about the undervaluing of Black life and how he's feeling about that. Also, an opportunity to collaborate with someone I knew from another Stanford alum, Chinese American, who was a jazz musician who I'd always liked. So Inspira was a way for me to bring together pieces of my life I hadn't brought together before. So I started working with Michael Jimenez, my husband, who is a classically trained violinist, playing mostly Western classical concert music. And Francis Wong, Chinese American saxophonist, composer, jazz musician. And my friend Matthew, who is really a storyteller and community organizer, also a vocalist. So bringing together those guys, people who I love, to create something coming from what is happening in this moment with regard to Black life. So that made it a big departure from everything else I had done before.
50 years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation, but 100 years later, the Negro is still not free. In a sense, we have come to our nation's capital to cash a check. There are those who are asking, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of the unspeakable horror of police brutality. No, we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream. I still have a dream. It is deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and come to live out the true meaning of its creed, that all men are created equal. Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free.
And it's interesting that they're all men.
I know that
wasn't the intention, but just talking about your journey, that you have these three men that you feel so comfortable with, and,
yes.
and you're surrounded by that male energy, and it's good.
Yes, thank God.
Yeah.
But I would say
absolutely.
I forgot to mention there is a very powerful woman who was also part of the ensemble who came on later and could travel less. So sometimes I forget to mention her. But Jerry McCurdy, who is a Liberian master drummer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you've also started teaching yoga classes. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah. So the year that I spent at the Spiritual Retreat Center, which is called Pendle Hill, I also started taking a yoga teacher training program up near Philadelphia. And I wanted to incorporate all these different modes of healing that has helped me to sink down to my purpose and to my real voice and to own the broadness of my vision and like that, to be my full self. I wanted to include all those pieces or modalities into theater. So I was looking at Reiki, yoga, ritual. So as part of that, I would incorporate elements of yoga and Reiki into our rehearsal process with the actors. And we did something I called an Ancestors Workshop. Again, it's part of our process of pulling in their lineage and strengths and non-visible support into the space with us. Mm-hmm. So after I left the retreat center, I continued to practice yoga and to teach in my home, and I'm still a regular practitioner. I teach much less often now, although I am hosting some women at my home tonight, for example.
Yes.
Most of my teaching now is definitely regarding my most recent book.
And that's a good segue, because I was about to get into that. I watch less and less of the news, even though I want to know what's going on, because to me there's so much bad news. And I wonder how to remain hopeful. And I will say that this Tribe of the Heart, coming out of your book, Say the Wrong Thing, seems like a really wonderful movement. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Say the Wrong Thing is a collection of essays that I wrote in the midst of I'm just going to call it the police killings. It just seemed like wave after wave of loss and of anger and despair, and coming face to face with the weight of white supremacy culture and the invisibleness of how racism works in our society. So that book was a collection of blog posts of me externally processing feelings and thought and searching for how to stay grounded and hopeful and powerful when it seemed like the institutions were all failing us. Mm-hmm. And what I came down to, spiritual practices that keep you in the present moment and that connect you with
a larger vision and a larger timeline. And when I say larger vision, I mean like to that overall sense of we're not here alone, and the we is really all of us, even though it seems like your particular group is under attack and you want to pull back from other groups because it's so painful. But holding on to the big we is part of the salvation. And it's part of what makes me hopeful and alive in this moment, is because I know I'm not willing to surrender the we to this us versus them, thinking that propels, white supremacy culture, that propels the Trump presidency.
I love the Alicia Keys song, We Are Here. I am partial to visionaries, and in this song she sings the impossible. We are here for all of us. That's why we are here. My soul loves the challenge in this song. We are here for each other, whether we are Syrians detained in Hungary or a teenager locked in solitary confinement on Rikers Island. We are here for all of us. None of us gets left out. As I sing along, I know the truth of her statement, but the tears well up because the gap between that truth and this reality seems infinite. Are we really here for all of us? How about the folks doing rebel runs in Lancaster County to support the Confederate flag? How about the people who killed children in Gaza or Nigeria? Am I here for all of us? Am I here for the police who arrested and knocked African-American tennis player James Blake to the ground, even though he repeatedly told them who he was? Am I here for the clerk in Alabama who does not want to marry same-sex couples? I know these folks aren't here for me, but in the face of this reality, Alicia still sings, we are here. We are here for all of us. We are here for all of us. That's why we're here.
So I feel like I've lost track of your question.
Oh, well, no, you tell me about the Tribe of the Heart. And what does HEART stand for in heart?
It's an acronym. You're right.
Yeah.
The Tribe of the Heart. So it is a movement, as you said earlier, of folks who I want to coalesce around this dual commitment to be for justice and for oneness, for accountability and for forgiveness, for there's more than enough for all of us, sort of like for people who want to stand in this bigger vision of who we are and who are willing to put themselves, who are willing to dedicate their art, their lives, their spiritual practices, all in the service of that. So that's what that movement is about. It doesn't have any infrastructure, but it's a vision I am living into by sharing the book and asking people to write me about the book, or inviting people to take classes with me and doing workshops with people. It's just like sort of identifying the tribe, people who are like attracted to that vision and to that energy, because it's countercultural.
I've had a couple of friends reach out to me, white friends, to ask questions, or, I've had like open discussions, well, this is Facebook, related to different things, and I think there's some people who have decided that they know how things are and they don't need any more information. But I think that there are people who want to understand that it should go both ways. I think that there may be more people who would be attracted to the tribe than you might think, especially as things become so polarized that it's like, okay, we're up against a wall, or you hope you're up against these two opposite walls, and what are you going to do? You're going to use a hammer to dig a hole in the wall so you can go even further apart, or you're going to take a step forward? Or, it just seems like we've explored as much as we can with the whole polarization thing. What I liked about the book in particular was that no punches are pulled as far as being really authentic, and that, to me, is the foundation of whatever healing or reconciliation will happen is not just like pretending that, okay, well, you should feel this way and anybody who doesn't feel this way is wrong, but actually saying how you feel in a respectful manner and then making that the starting point to open up other people to be able to say how they feel and going from there and coming to something that isn't just to look nice or be polite, but is actually a more authentic coalescing, as you say, that people really are coming together. So I applaud you for that. Whenever I see that you're doing a workshop or something like that, I'm glad to see that you're getting more opportunities to spread the word. So let me ask a couple more questions that I ask everybody and then wind this up. What comes to mind for you when you hear the word beauty?
My first association when you said that was my friend Ruby Taylor's film, Beautiful Me.
Yeah.
And the documentary about Black girls and our beauty trauma, the inculcated belief that we're not beautiful enough or there's something wrong with us. And the second thing that occurred to me with beauty is what I said about when I'm feeling beautiful, I'm feeling like I'm in the flow of the great love and truth and vision and groundedness of people before me and after me. That's a beautiful place to stand and to occupy, and there's no anxiety because there's no separation in that space. Yeah, that feels beautiful.
Absolutely. Can art change the world?
Art in and of itself doesn't have to change anything. It can just reinforce what is.
Okay.
So if your intention that art shifts something, then that intention is powerful. And I can also say there's tons of art that who knows what people intended, but then people on the ground took it and made it something. Whatever the originators might have thought didn't matter because it was the people who decided to pick it up and amplify it, speak to it, sample it, that have made it a force of change. So that's a big question, Maria.
Well, I'm glad I asked that question because I was thinking that you've been using art as your way of reaching out and trying to affect change, but I guess one should never assume that you know the answer to a question because I was so sure you were going to just say yes, art can change the world, but yeah, I like your answer though. It gave it more weight even than the question has by itself, which I think it's not a light question, but wow. Okay, well, is there something else that you would like to add?
I just want to affirm you and say I love that you are owning your power and your creativity by creating this series and saying that your voice matters and who you interview matters and implicitly that art matters because you say so. You're like, I just love that. You're not waiting for someone to put a little crown on your head and say, Maria, go forth. You're the one. You're like, you're.
Well, I mean, this whole thing feels a little bit like I don't have any idea where it's going, but I really am feeling with each person that I speak to that there's something that these people I'm speaking to and that I'm choosing have to communicate to a wider audience. And it's not that any of these people are not doing it, yourself included, but yeah, this feels special to me, and I really hope that other people will experience it and find it special because I'm very much enjoying this, and I'm very much finding myself, I don't know, it's a very affirming thing to do. And everybody that I've spoken to, they deserve to be spread out into the cosmos in some way, like somebody should meet them and hear what they have to say and hear what they're doing, and somebody should be inspired. So, thank you. Okay, I'm going to do my little wrap-up thing, which is just thank you so much for listening to Finding Beauty. I'm Maria Thompson Corley.
The theme music for Finding Beauty is Symphony of Light, written and performed by Kiana Corley, with assistance on the cello from Allegra Banks. Rusty Banks was the producer. Right now, you're listening to Liszt's Petrarch Sonnet No. 104, performed by yours truly. You can hear the rest of it on my CD, Music from the Novel Letting Go, available on CreateSpace and Amazon. If you're interested, you can check me out at mariacorley.com or mariasworld.us. You can also find me on Twitter at Maria Corley or YouTube. My recordings are available through Albany or Amazon. My novel, Letting Go, is available on Smashwords, CreateSpace, Barnes & Noble, and Amazon. Or drop me a line on my site, and I'll send you a signed copy. I want to leave you with one more quote. Do your little bit of good where you are. It's the little bits of good put together that overwhelm the world. Desmond Tutu. Have a beautiful day.